You're listening to the Unsung Podcast, where we talk about albums that we think are unsung classics, and then you guys tell us if we're right or wrong. This is the Unsung Podcast. Hi, you're listening to episode 61 of the Unsung Podcast. On our last regular episode, that was episode number 60, where we put Angela Knows by the Trail of Dead's Madonna against Source Tags and Codes. The public decided that Source Tags and Codes does indeed make it into discography. So thank you very much for everyone who listened to that episode and voted. And the last actual episode was our black metal mixtape special. We each picked a record and the winner was Thorns by Thorns, which was David's choice. So thank you very much to everybody who voted on that too. It looks like that the true cult black metal wins again. And now, this week, we discuss Atrocity Exhibition by Danny Brown. Enjoy. Hi, you're listening to the Unsung Podcast. I am your host, Mark Fraser, and I'm joined by two members of the Deep State.
To my right is Mr. Chris Cusack. He's a member of the Deep South as well. I've been watching a documentary. Rich Hall doing his documentary about the Deep South, and so I've just got Louisiana on my mind.
Sounds like the title of a beautiful song.
I might write that song for you, Christopher.
To my left is David Weaver, who's a member of the Beautiful South, a bit less glamorous.
I had this argument in my work office quite recently. I fucking hate the Beautiful South.
Oh yeah,
they're genuinely. They're so twee, and like every song sounds like that one song a band has where they're gonna go, oh, let's just do like a fun like major key like lol song, but their entire back catalogue is that. I fucking hate them.
They're kind of quite far down that road towards Lighthouse Family.
Yeah, they are.
I'd much rather prefer to listen to the smooth silence of the Lighthouse Family than Beautiful South. No, but I mean,
wow.
The Beautiful South do make a cock joke in that song, Perfect 10.
It's all about cocks and dress sizes, is it not? I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, and then there's that song where don't marry her, fuck me, and that's edgy.
Edgy.
Fuck off.
Guy was in the House Martins with Fatboy Slim. He was.
Yeah.
That's about
it's the start of a nexus in the Beautiful South. An impromptu nexus.
Oh dear.
To my left is David Weaver, such a titan of the Glasgow music scene that he can effortlessly straddle with his astonishing knowledge and depth of knowledge the very Aryan black metal scene and this week Detroit hip hop and not even break a sweat.
Yeah,
I know.
No sweat has been broken.
I did a DJ'd a black metal night on Thursday and I DJ'd a hip hop night on Friday.
Was that like washing yourself in the river after?
Yeah, truly, fully cleansed. So this album that we're talking about, I think Mark and I both decided to nominate it.
Yeah, well, I think after the last couple of weeks, we had to step left a little bit. And
we had to get away from the angry white European male.
So we thought we'd go to the angry black American male instead, which is very on brand for us.
just one more box ticked, really.
Yeah, one more box ticked. So I mean, if all the far right fans we had last week are just deserting us in droves this week, make of that what you will, I suppose. But yeah, we both decided on Atrocity Exhibition pretty much straight away when you mentioned Danny Brown.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think there's any issue with nominating Danny Brown, because I think he's a really, really interesting rapper.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a really interesting character. He does things that, he definitely sort of furrows his own field, as it were.
It's interesting that you guys mentioned or chose him. Obviously, there's maybe a little bit of magical prescience, because one of the things that came across reading about him was his problems with depression and drugs and anxiety and kind of chronic mental health. And obviously, this is the week that Keith Flint took his own life.
Yeah.
So it's an issue that again raises its head, seemingly disproportionately so, within music.
Mm-hmm. Such is the nature of when news like that breaks. We did have a brief discussion about whether or not we should do a Prodigy record, but it was literally yesterday, and we'd already done the prep for this.
Yeah, I don't think we would have given it justice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I suspect when the time comes that we do a mixtape on the British dance scene, they'll feature prominently. I could see them getting nominated anyway, as at least one of us would want to put them forward. So,
and it's a real shame what happened. Just come off a tour, but to go on another tour, just released a new record last year, and like so many people that we know and that whose music we've grown up listening to, 1 second are there, next second they're gone, and nobody's seen it coming. And it's just like you say, Chris, it's like a sad side effect of the age that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't have the metadata on it maybe to hand, but I'd imagine that period between the end of one long tour and anticipation or the daunting prospect of another long tour is probably one of the times that musicians, especially musicians with chronic mental illness, are at their weakest and possibly their most vulnerable. Because even when you're looking forward to going on tour, I mean, we've gone maybe like 5 weeks at a time maximum, and I've whilst being very, very happy about going, a couple of nights before you're like, actually, shit, no, I just don't want to go. I just don't want to go.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine that scaled up exponentially for a project as big as Prodigy. So yeah. And the guy did a lot of gear. The guy probably had a reasonably eventful life full of highs and lows, so I'd imagine that takes its toll as well.
He was, but seemingly by all accounts, he was a very nice guy as well.
Yeah, and Dave Kerr, fan of the pod, and former editor of Skinny magazine in Scotland, interviewed him and said he was amongst the most cooperative and enjoyable interviewees that he'd dealt with. I believe that initially Keith Flint had been, I believe initially the magazine had been offered 15 minutes, and ended up Keith insisted on doing well over an hour and was very forthcoming with all manner of interesting stuff, and even put Dave in touch with someone else for future work. I think it was, yeah.
You get a lot of the I met this guy at a charity do once. He was very down to earth and very funny, sort of stories.
Testimonial wise,
it's it's interesting that Lemmy, who has come to sort of satirize that entire testimonial look back at, I think he did one for Keith Flint and then took it back because he reversed that and felt it was sort of inappropriate in this case, because he was like, fuck, I don't want to take the piss out of this guy, because it's, there's nothing really to laugh about in terms of this. And then secondly, there was a good testimonial.
Lemmy or Lemmy?
Lemmy, as it.
I said Lemmy. I was like,
no, Lemmy, the famous Scottish comedian, who every time somebody dies, he says, met him at a charity do once. He was down to earth and very funny, and he's got on to BBC News about 40 times being quoted for met Roger Moore at a charity do and all these things.
By the way, did you know that Roger Moore invented Magnum ice creams?
Fuck off. Do you know Margaret Thatcher invented Mr. Whippy ice creams?
She actually didn't. She was a chemist that worked for the company that...
Magnum, are you joking?
Roger Moore apparently was asked in an interview if he wanted anything in the world, what would he want? And apparently he loved chalk ices. And he said, I wish Walls would put a stick in these things so that I didn't get it all over myself. And Walls heard about it, did it, sent him one, and apparently he was delighted.
That's incredible.
That's pretty cool.
You'd think they'd make more of that.
I feel like
Just have his face on it.
We're maybe somewhat disrespecting the somber tone that we were on there.
No, but an actual funny testimonial I saw was, but also touching, was James Blunt posted that when he was he still is, but when he was exceptionally famous and derided and a figure of hate in the indie music world.
He's very funny, James Blunt.
He was at I think he was at the Brit Awards or something, and he said, when Liam Gallagher told me to fuck off and die, and when Damon Albarn refused to get his photo taken with me, Keith Flint just came up to me and said, "Oh mate, I love what you're doing, hope you're great," and was just a really nice guy to him. And
if you're,
he's a real person.
If you're a Twitter user, by the way, you could do far worse things with your life than following James Blunt, because he's very, very funny. Really, really self-deprecating. Highly recommended.
We probably won't cover James Blunt on this podcast, but
Seems unlikely.
we will recommend his tweets.
I mean, I'm going to cards on the table. I would rather listen to James Blunt and the Lighthouse Family.
I think I'm with you though.
Well, I think you're wrong, but
I'm sure you do.
Anyway, so yeah, let's go back to the record that we're talking about, Atrocity Exhibition by Danny Brown.
I'm sweating like I'm in a rave. Been in this room for 3 days. Think I'm hearing voices. Paranoid and think I'm seeing ghosts. Oh shit.
So, like, interestingly enough, it is the sound of a guy that's been through a fuck lot. He's been through the mill, musically, socially. He's, had big success. Not huge success, but he's a famous touring musician and has had to deal with addiction, mental health issues. And I think the reason we probably both chose this record is it's because it's the one that really has a strong narrative through it. It's really introspective, it's reflective, it's dark, it's weird, it's funny, it's it's a lot of things.
Comedies, like the humour is a big thing in this guy's back catalogue.
Yeah, I think there's a bit less of it on this record, but there's still, I don't think you can ever get away from that.
Yeah, the Triple X album, I noticed, was, like, even by his own admission, like, pretty laugh out loud at points throughout.
So should we go into who Danny Brown is?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's do the biographical details.
Will I do that then, Mark?
Yes, David, you can, since you brought it up, I believe.
So Danny Brown, do you know what was funny actually? I don't know who had this story. Somebody in the office maybe.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I know the story you're going to tell. I think you've told me the story.
Yeah. Somebody was saying that was in a Glasgow taxi and was off, I think it was going to the show that he played at the Arches. This is a few years ago. And was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to gig at the Arches." And the taxi driver was like, "Oh, who are you going to see?" "Oh, I'm going to see Danny Brown. He's a rapper." "Danny Brown? He's not a rapper." He's like, "No, he is. He's a rapper. He's from America." "No, he's not. Danny Brown's fae Pollock." So
it's a very sort of typically British name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, his real name is Daniel Dewan Sewell. Is that right?
Daniel Dewan Sewell, yeah. So he's 37 now.
Mm-hmm.
So he was 34 or 35 when this record came out.
I'm just going to put this out there. I think that's pronounced Sewell.
Sewell.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, your guess is as good as mine.
When I was at non-denominational primary school, the vicar or minister or whatever the Protestant equivalent was that led the Easter service was Sewell, Mr. Sewell.
All right, I'll give you that then.
Cool.
No relation.
Chris's church upbringing.
Yeah, non-denominational school, Protestant church. Excuse me.
I know that happened to me in the Highlands. We didn't have Protestant or Catholic schools, but we just had the local minister who was always whatever he was. He was definitely
wasn't
not
sure what
he definitely
word was
wasn't a Catholic. Anyway. But anyway, so yeah, Danny Brown grew up in Detroit, which I think heavily influenced his music.
Yeah, like a lot of artists who come from Detroit have got quite a similar kind of flow to their kind of rapping.
But he seemed to grow up in a strong musical family, or he certainly got to listen to stuff like LL Cool J, Roy Ayers, Tribe Called Quest.
Dad was a DJ,
yeah,
I believe.
Yeah. So he was influenced by that sort of classic hip hop and soul sound. And he says that he always wanted to be a rapper. He said that in kindergarten I'd say I wanted to be a rapper, and people would just think that's quite weird. So no, he finally did it. He was one of these men that grew up to be the astronaut they wanted to be.
He said, I heard one of the interesting details about his early life was that his mum read Dr. Seuss to him. And that kind of, he got really into obviously Dr. Seuss is famous for the
Cat in the Hat and
but the fact that everything rhymes, and he used to walk about as a kid speaking in rhymes because of that, which then led to him developing a bit of an aptitude for just rhyming in his everyday life, and that coupled with his dad's knowledge and involvement in music sort of seems like the writing was on the wall.
Yeah. So he originally it seemed like it was quite a tight family group, but then his parents split up when he was 17 or 18.
Well, I heard that his gran owned 5 houses. Like they owned 3 in a row. Then she let various divisions of the family stay in these houses, and then she had another 2 on the east side of Detroit, and she let other members of the family stay there. So they were close in that sense. They weren't very well off at all, but they were able to stay within this kind of family unit in this collection of houses, which probably kept them quite tight as well, until, as you said, the point whereby the parents split up.
Yeah, and in that sort of neighborhood, he started selling drugs. He was sort of bringing home the bacon for the family. But it's interesting, he said that he would stop as soon as he got in trouble with the law once. He always seemed to set himself the goals of, I'm not in it for the lifestyle, I'm in it to just, fund the family and do whatever. Although he then says that he did that for 5 years and then got in trouble with the law but decided to keep going.
Yeah, the second time as well, it was because he violated his bail and then was just on the outside for ages, and eventually must have just got randomly stopped, and they caught him and did him for another 9 months or something for bail violation.
Then he got out of jail.
Parole violation.
2007, and started taking it a bit more seriously, as he says. His career a bit more seriously, going back to that dream, that astronaut he wanted to be.
What?
Dave made that reference earlier on, so
yeah,
it was a callback.
That was a good callback. We can cut this bit out, but leave that bit in.
No, I think people want to see the inner workings. It's like when you go and see Stuart Lee and he talks you through the mechanics of humour.
We're not quite at Stuart Lee level, I'm afraid.
Not yet, maybe one day.
Speak for yourself.
One day. But yeah, so he started releasing tracks, and he ended up working with, funnily enough, 50 Cent's sort of G Unit guys.
Yeah. Tony Yeo, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But he says that G Unit didn't sign him because of his look, because he was a kind of jeans and t-shirt guy, and they wanted people that were really bling and sort of
that's what's really interesting, is that although he was involved in literally selling drugs and stuff like that, at that time rap music was hugely into bling and into sort of gangster stuff, and he was always way more of a sort of trying to go down his own path, and he was into sort of indie music, and he was into alternative pop culture things and stuff like that.
I think the inverted commas quote was that he was too rock for their roster. I mean, he isn't averse to the bling chat lyrically, but certainly look wise is pretty different.
So in 2010 he released a couple of mixtapes which had gone down well, and then he released The Hybrid, which was his debut album.
Looking at the wall, you know the other half. Blue Tiger fitted in a 7.5, and I rock that shit any climate, any weather. And my brand new Blue Tiger fitted new era, and I rep that shit right.
It's also the first time he used that sort of high-pitched vocal that he's kind of well known for.
Yeah, when you listen to his early stuff, and there's a couple of tracks on Atrocity exhibition that he goes back to it.
Yeah.
He's got a much, sort of lower natural tone, and you can hear that it's way more sort of Andre 3000 Outkast influence.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. I think he references Outkast quite heavily in his music. I think it's probably I mean, the record's called The Hybrid because it's when he was kind of moving, deliberately moving away from that. Maybe that was why. Because I think he sounds a bit like Big Boy sometimes as well.
I think the one is Be Real.
Be Real as well. Be Real's he's on one of the songs.
I know, but I think that's kind of perhaps not totally by coincidence, because it's so Cypress Hill, his vocal, that really nasal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just that was the immediate reference point for me.
Yeah, the hybrid. So I mean, he talks about drugs a lot. He obviously takes a lot of drugs.
Takes a lot about drugs.
He takes a lot about drugs. He's released 4 albums. So XXX in 2011, and then 2013 was Old.
The XXX album, they released it for free on Fool's Gold label, that Brooklyn.
Yeah, that's right. So
label.
he'd done the hybrid, and that he was, that went down really well. He got a lot of
it was cult,
praise.
but XXX is the breakthrough one for him in terms of credibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the hybrid is definitely it's much more traditional in its sound. And
there's a lot of sort of like
well.
G-funk influence and like classic hip hop stuff.
Well, we were setting up tonight. I was listening to the earlier stuff, like Browntown, and what's the other one?
Detroit State of Mind.
Detroit State of Mind.
There's
which,
4 mixtapes did for that.
Yeah, which are clearly, even to like somebody such as myself who's not particularly well versed in hip hop, very, very much owe a debt to kind of classical.
Definitely old school sort of.
Yeah. It's far more reminiscent of early 90s stuff.
But there's also some sounds on the hybrid which can. There's some synth. I don't know if it's sampled or played. Smattering of it on that record, so you can see him kind of thinking ahead a little bit about where he wants to go next. And you talk about XXX, which I think is a really good record as well. But for me, Old is the one where he pays like the most tribute to the old school sound, whilst also making it sound really modern and up to date.
XXX was Spin's hip hop album of the year.
Yeah,
I think it's a really good record.
Yeah.
It's got that sort of quite tight percussive element to all the production. There's a lot of that sort of live snare sound in it. Whereas,
and as I said, there's a lot of humour in XXX as well.
Yeah, it's got some really heavy stuff as well, like Die Like a Rockstar and Monopoly are like really heavy hip hop.
Monopoly's amazing. I love that song.
Yeah.
My nigga, you ain't been what I been through, and if so, you would take a pencil to your temple. Cause I done served fiends on they menstrual, ain't even had pads up they panties with tissue. Hit the app cause they mouth ain't bleeding, and your style like...
and he also described that album as endless debauchery, just start to finish, sort of...
Yeah.
What's the word? Abandon. I mean, there's some tracks in that I found really, really, really hard to listen to.
Yeah.
The track I Will, lyrically, I don't think I could be more alienated by hip hop.
Oh, that nigga scared, let me show you what it's about. Spread apart them lips, put that clit up in my mouth, and that thing so juicy. I'ma call it jamba. Licking it in circles, got me calling me your papa. Tongue going faster.
I just can't stand it. It's like, it's something that I don't really know a lot about Danny Brown other than a couple of standout moments of his catalogue. I know Ain't It Funny, which is quite atypical anyway, and almost crosses into like electro in like a weird way. I expected something that was a bit freer of hip hop stereotypes than this. Lyrically,
than XXX.
Lyrically, it's definitely
Danny Brown generally. In fact, I would say more so from XXX onwards. The earlier stuff, the kind of the mixtape stuff, sounded both sonically and lyrically, like in terms of thematically, a bit truer to the original hip hop, a bit more conscious, socially conscious, and things like that. From XXX onwards, there is just so much fucking misogyny and so much chat about money and drugs and bitches and threesomes, and he's never met a girl that he can't make come, and all this bullshit, like absolute fucking bullshit, that it's just almost impossible for me to make like an honest appraisal of the music. And this kind of like sent me down that rabbit hole that we've sort of danced around and I guess investigated in other podcasts. But I mean, it's not the use of things like the word bitches. I get that there's a vernacular. I get that it doesn't, that you have to kind of judge it on its own merits. I refuse to subscribe to the idea that black musicians are any less capable of being able to distinguish between shite patter, like shite unacceptable, sexist, misogynistic patter, and not to mention just the base boasting of like, I just made 30 grand in 30 minutes and I'd spent it before I counted it. Like in any other field in music, black or white, in indie rock and fucking anything, if those were the lyrics, you would throw that fucking disc out the window of your car. Or, well, I know we don't usually discs in cars, but I'm old. In any other field, and like I said, it's not about the swearing. I'm not Tipper Gore here. I just mean it's just the thematic content of the songs is just bullshit. It's just so demeaning, especially to women. And I don't want to get too puritanical about it, but I don't believe in the moral relativism of saying, "Oh, it's a different culture."
There's also a lot of irony involved in it. Like there's a lot of like fake boasting.
I think that's disingenuous. I think if this was the case, everybody, despite like we have openly talked about what a horrible piece of shit Gene Simmons is, and Gene Simmons has never said anything in these lyrics even remotely as bad as any given song on Triple X, right? And Motley Crue, for all of their innuendo and their smut, never even came close to any of this. I had lines like, I've never met a girl that I couldn't make come. I had a threesome last night, couldn't get it hard, so shoved it in her with my thumb and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's kind of like somewhere between the Bloodhound Gang and like The Dirt by Motley Crue, but yet nobody treats the musicians that say it accordingly. There's like a kind of cultural relativism where we assume that because they're black musicians, there's a different standard for them. Like black women don't deserve to be respected by musicians singing about them, or, you know, black men can't be held accountable for fucking horrendous messages like that in their music. And it's something I can't shake. I can't get out of it because I don't hold black people, white people, Asian people at any different standards of behavior.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a black thing. It's a hip hop thing, and I know hip hop is essentially black, but you know, it's a cultural thing. It's not a racial thing.
I think I get your point there, but I would say it's I mean, when white people do hip hop, we talk about cultural appropriation. So I think that has to be taken into account. It's a black genre predominantly, and when we've done it in the past, when we've covered white artists doing hip hop, we've spent 20 minutes to half an hour just talking about the fact that it's a white artist capitalizing on a black genre. So it is overwhelmingly a black genre, and it bothers me that the climate in that genre is so accommodating and rewarding, in fact, of that bullshit, because these are grown adults, and whatever we say, you know, I know loads of people will be rolling their eyes, but it really is cultural relativism. It is a sense that, oh, they don't know any better. And that's what offends me about it. It's like, they do know better. They know just as well as we do. They do know better. They know that that's not acceptable to say that. They know that the line in it where he talks about making, I'm going to make Sarah Palin deep throat me until she gets her hiccups. Like, yeah, okay, I get that that's kind of funny and a joke, but, you know, these days, the notion of like grabbing a woman by the head and ramming your dick down her throat until she's gagging, that doesn't tend to go over well in indie rock. You know, ask Ryan Adams and fucking, you know, many others who have just been pulled up for various transgressions of moral codes, how they feel about the fact that there's free license in the hip hop community and the rap community for those kind of things. So my problem is, musically, I really liked a lot of this, and yet I cannot engage because I constantly get drawn out of it by this puerile, morally objectionable bullshit that seems to just get a pass by people and I can't understand why. I don't understand why we're holding this community, whether you think they're predominantly black or not, but I would say they really are, why this community is holding itself and others are holding it to a lower standard. It must be endlessly frustrating for black musicians who don't approve of it. They're like, why are you guys still doing this? Like it must be so frustrating. And a black musician playing indie rock, you know, would never get away with saying this shit. So why is it different? That's something that just, it was disappointing because I really thought he was going to be thematically different and I was going to be able to engage with how good the music is, because Ain't It Funny doesn't have any of that stuff in it, and it's a killer song and I really like it. And I was like, oh, if this is going to be an album of that kind of stuff, this is going to be great. And it's absolutely not. And then looking back, up to XXX, at least, it's not a career of that either. Before that, I like it. I like the old school stuff and I like his lyrical approach. But
No, I mean,
I'm just out when it comes to Danny Brown. I'm just like, close the book. I'm out. I can't endorse that. It's bullshit.
I know. I mean, I totally understand, and it is something that, much as if when you listen to black metal, you have to work around the politics of them. When you listen to certain hip hop, you have to work around the gender politics of that. And for me, personally, I got into Danny Brown because I think I heard some stuff off XXX, and then I heard his stuff that he started doing with Rusty. He appeared on a Rusty track, and then Rusty produced some stuff on Old. And I mean, as we've talked about on this podcast before, I'm not much of a lyrics man. I just like a fucking slamming beat. So like Danny Brown was enlisting really good producers, and I loved the sound of his flow, and I loved like the weird alternative hip hop that he was doing, and in Old, he really sort of introduced and started playing with some of the trap stuff that was happening. So much like I never listened to the fucking lyrics on an Emperor album. I don't necessarily.
They're a little bit harder to pick out.
Well, yeah, that's also true.
No, I mean,
and to me, it is a problematic thing when I listen to a lot of hip hop, and when I fucking DJ a hip hop night, there's some tracks that you're just like, they shouldn't be singing these things.
Yeah, I mean,
but when the bass goes through, you don't really care. Don't
get like, see, that's the thing. Like musically, I get it, and like I said, "Ain't It Funny" was the standard for Danny Brown. I'd be in.
Yeah.
I think there's a cultural reckoning going on just now, though, and what you have when it comes to hip hop is, as best I can see it, if the arbiters of this moral outrage are, the mainstream, and the mainstream is predominantly white controlled. What you have when it comes to, say, the Me Too movement and women's rights and the right to not be spoken about in this way routinely and objectified routinely multiple times in the same song, in the same verse, let alone in the same album, that seems to clash with the ethnic sensibilities of minorities. And it's like white people don't want to be seen to criticise a predominantly black genre because they're accused of being like culturally tone deaf, and there's a lot of like hierarchy comes into play.
Yeah.
And the black community, understandably, because it's so marginalised in so many ways, is quite defensive. You've seen that same problem with people like R. Kelly and Michael Jackson, with members of the black community speaking out against their own community for defending people they shouldn't have been defending, purely because they saw it as an us v them, and they sided with people like R. Kelly because he was a prominent black man, and they want to protect their prominent black men almost at all costs sometimes, or at least until it becomes so bad that they simply can't do it anymore. And I think there is like a clash of, there's a clash of like political correctness here, where it's like, oh yeah, we want to stand up for women's rights, and we will absolutely persecute Rivers Cuomo for some benign lyric in some album that he released 20 years ago, but we will not persecute Danny Brown for 1,000 quite contentious lyrics in one 40-minute album. And there's no way to square that circle. There's no way to seriously deny that the white kind of mainstream is struggling to apply its standards evenly, because it's worried about being accused of being racist simply because it clamps down on a genre where that sort of stuff is totally out of control. And it is. I don't agree with like heavy censorship, but I agree with consistency. And if we expect certain standards for musicians, and I do, I'm not saying they should go to jail. I'm just saying I don't want to buy it. I don't want to hear it. But I certainly don't want people that will like lecture me on political correctness to then go down to a club and start dancing about to move, bitch, get out the way, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, that kind of fucking hypocrisy really sits badly with me. And as I said, the main overriding sense of this has just been disappointment, because I really thought this was going to be something that went past it. There's plenty that do go past it, but we're not covering it this week.
I think I disagree. I mean, I agree with you on many points here, but I think in terms of Danny Brown, I genuinely do think that there's a sense of irony, a sense of self-awareness that he has.
Tell that to women.
Women fucking love Danny Brown.
I think, like, if you said that about Rivers Cuomo in, Across the Sea, where he was slated for, objectifying, or like, what do you call it? Sorry, in Pinkerton, for, objectifying Japanese girls, or for, perving on groupies that liked him by getting into long distance relationships with the fan letters. I mean, he took shit for that.
Yeah.
And if you compare that to, like, proportionally to this,
I mean, once again, we suffer from not having a female voice on this podcast, but some of my best pals really fucking love Danny Brown, and they are women.
yeah,
And they
no doubt are women that are, for example, very in favour of a lot of the things that were done by the Me Too movement.
yeah.
So then confront them with the inconsistency of that and say, well, how do you square that? Because they don't.
No,
It's-
because
it's-
they are aware of his. I don't know.
Frankly, I genuinely suspect that for a lot of them there is no consistency in that. I'm not saying that's always the case, but the level and the frequency of these references in this music, it is stretching credulity beyond any fucking sustainable point to say that it is all ironic. It's not all ironic, and even if it was ironic, it's still in bad taste. I just don't see any way out of this. I think that in any other genre, my whole point is I believe in equality, and I think there's a cultural relativism and a moral relativism at play here, and that's very rarely a good thing, because it actually denotes a form of racism. It denotes a racism of low expectation, where you're like, oh, they just don't know any better. And you see it applied to all kinds of walks of life. You see it applied to Islam and some of its practices. You see it applied in this case, I would say, as well. And people are walking on eggshells around it because they don't want to be the one that gets accused of being racist. So I think that's a really problematic theme. I don't want to derail the entire podcast though, so just sorry.
Mark, do you have any retorts?
That's one of the reasons why I'm very particular about the hip hop that I like. In the case of Danny Brown, Atrocity Exhibition particularly is about like his basically mental degradation and downfall. So I think a lot of lyrics that are on that record kind of stand up in terms of, you know, dealing with fame and drugs and excess in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say black community, but the hip hop community this is something that they should be reckoning with, something that they need to reckon with at some point, because fundamentally, as someone that also believes in equality, it does make it quite difficult for me to listen to this music as well, a lot of the time, you know. And as someone that really likes lyrics, it does make it quite hard to swallow sometimes, you know. And
Not as hard as it is for Sarah Palin.
I knew you were going to say that. I said it and instantly regretted it.
No, but I mean, like this makes Kiss sound like fucking choir boys. It really does.
I mean, the whole album is a sort of reflection on his faults, though. And like, I think you look back at his records, I was like, The Hybrid is basically his weed album, because it's like your classic hip hop album.
Mama, I'm honored to be your son. Get snatch a snack and stabs out and I'll rip a single one. Used to be in a rush to finish off my sack. I was so thirsty, dog, so no pregnant bitch crack. Let her pay me extra, smoke it in the back.
XXX was his cocaine album, because it's fucking mad and all over the place. Old was his Ecstasy MDMA, because it's like his big party one and it's like just out there.
Don't let me into my zone. Don't let me into my zone. Don't let me into my zone. You haters, leave me alone. I say, don't let me into my zone. Don't let me into my zone. Don't let me into my zone. You haters, leave me alone. Like Lieutenant Dan.
And then this is his like come down album. This is like, I'm still fucking taking drugs at 6 a.m. I'm just taking everything. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and I've survived.
I think there is so much regret in this record.
There's a lot of regret, and there's a lot of introspection. And I think when you read interviews with him, he's very aware. He's not a guy that's going to be going out and like advocating fucking sexual violence against people.
No, quite the opposite. So he knows better.
Yeah, so a lot of what he says is meta.
I mean, that's just, it sounds like you're bending over backwards for it.
No, but I have also said that a lot of things are problematic, and that's like, I'm glad that we're talking about
Deeply
this.
so. Like, yeah, I mean, I think like what a beautifully ironic spin in this as well is that in 2015 he came out and he's writing a sort of Dr. Seuss inspired children's book for his daughter, ostensibly, to discuss and promote self-esteem in black girls, which is fucking laughable when you listen to the words of his songs.
I think in the case of this particular artist, I think that you're minimising the capacity for self-reflection. I mean, obviously he's a huge fan of Joy Division and the album is named after Joy Division song, but it also fucking completely describes what the record's about. It's about the Atrocity Exhibition. Do you know what I mean? It's an exhibition of his atrocities. That's what the whole record is.
Yeah, this
that's,
is a man,
that's the concept
he's
that
not-
it goes through. This is clearly a guy that has learned throughout the course of his career. He is very self-reflective. You know, he has quite, I guess you could say, nihilistic and existential on this record as well, to a huge degree, but he's clearly got the capacity for self-reflection. And a lot of hip-hop does not have that. A lot of old school and a lot of fucking trap doesn't have that capacity for thinking on a deeper level about the tropes and the things that, you know, make the genre what it is. I'd be interested to see what his next record is going to sound like, because it might be a departure again. We don't know. This is a guy that's clearly spent a lot of time thinking and constructing the kind of music that he wants to make. He's not banging out fucking tune after tune every year like a lot of big artists do, who are very much guilty of writing music and lyrics which are exactly, as we've all said, are quite problematic. And I think this record and the tone of it, and it's particularly a lot of the samples and the music behind it, is really fucking downbeat. And I think that's deliberate. You know, I think this is a deeply self-reflective record, and I think that's why it stands out.
But the song I Will from Triple X, I mean, if you've read the lyrics, there is nothing satirical or ironic about those lyrics.
Yeah, but that's 2 albums before. We haven't chosen that album.
We're talking about an artist in general, though.
Yeah, I know, but what we're talking about is an exceptionally self-reflective record. I've said that like this is like his sort of come down album, and he's looking, and there's a lot of regret. And he's been involved in the mainstream hip hop scene where, like, if he doesn't rap about girls and women, then he's not going to get a fucking record deal.
Oh, well, that makes it all right then.
No, but like, so he's done that album 8 years ago, and then he's dealt with
when we didn't know that sexism was wrong.
No, but he's dealing with that, and he's admitting, issues here.
Like, I'm not asking you to be like, you're not an avatar for hip hop in general, and I don't want it to come across like that. And I understand that you guys make a disconnect when you're listening to this kind of music. And I think, as we've seen in so many of the different subjects that we've gone into, I think there's an undeniable, I know we're doing a lot of contortions here, we're making a lot of excuses for a guy about implied irony and all these different like textual levels that we've got to take into account. Fundamentally, this guy writes a lot of like smutty, misogynistic stuff, and also is prone to boasting about money and drugs and how much he's worth. And it's like, fuck off. Anybody else does that, fuck off. I just think that aspect of it is just profoundly inconsistent. And if that is a standard, then there's almost no artist other than out and out racists that we can really critique for their lyrics, because Motley Crue are nowhere near as bad as this guy.
I mean, I think we all basically fundamentally agree here, but I think if you think about this record and if you think about some of the later songs on the record as well, there's a couple of songs at the end, like From the Ground and When It Rained, right? From the Ground basically talks about all the shit from his life and all the shit he's had to go through to get where he is, and there's definitely a lyric on either that song or When It Rained where he actually talks about how fuck being on the radio and fuck being famous, because it doesn't matter.
Totally, but then track 4, he's got Poker with My Tentacle and sucking on it like she's getting vitamins and minerals.
How is that not funny?
The argument is that this is a reformed record, and I just read you like...
No, but also, what you are not seeming to notice is that there is a sense of humour in this record. He does not mean like that. Those lyrics, you were like fucking Barbara Whitehouse reading those lyrics, reading them straight up with a Mary Whitehouse, whatever her name. Like, he's saying that as a joke. He's supposed to be like, it is childish. It is, it's a fucking joke.
So his album's a joke?
No, certain parts of this record are tinged with comedy. Certain parts of this record are tinged with fucking tragedy and introspection. Certain parts are tinged with, like boastfulness and things like that. It's a complicated record. Just because he has some fucking jokes on this record doesn't make it a joke record.
I can't decontextualize this. Within hip hop, it's totally appropriate, if you will, in the current climate. And in fact, it's probably slightly ahead of the curve in that respect. But it's still way behind the cultural curve in terms of what we've all sort of agreed in the last 10 years is actually acceptable in terms of rhetoric. And that's frustrating, and it's disappointing because musically it kicks ass.
I think it's. I think the bigger point, that you're making is it fundamentally does ring true, right? And I do often find myself wondering why that, the element of self-reflection that certain genres of music have had upon the individuals and, the music and the themes within them has come to pass, and in some genres it's not. And you're right, there's bands like Motley Crue and there's bands like Kiss who come with reputations which fully embraced that at the time, and to some extent still do, and we have hip-hop artists who do the same thing and they're still lauded for it today. And you're totally right, it is a really difficult circle to square or square to circle, you know what I mean? Like it's not something that, I don't know, it's just, it is troubling. I find it troubling.
I don't think we can, and I think that ingredient that's causing that, the catalyst for that, is the uncertainty amongst the sort of white monopolised mainstream media, where we don't want to come across as being misogynistic, but we also don't want to come across as persecuting an overwhelmingly black style of music. And I think that is the clash, and I don't think that can really be resolved currently. I think it has to be policed internally. You'll probably find that it's going to take the musicians in that scene that don't rap like this speaking out and saying, why are we still doing this? We're not idiots.
And there is no doubt a black mainstream media as well, and obviously I don't know if they have these conversations, if this could be a topic within the hip hop community which we just don't have sight of. Totally unsure about that. Might not be, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be a conversation that people who like that kind of music should have, or that scene should have, if that makes sense.
It's something that'd be nice to explore if we ever get a chance to interview folks from the black music scene, or an aspect of the black music scene. Some of the bands over here, people like Young Fathers, for example, might be interesting to speak to in that, because lyrically, man, those guys are superb. So it'd be curious to know what kind of insight they have.
And we think about something like POS as well, who's completely opposite of this.
Brilliant, exactly.
Completely opposite from this. And he definitely comes at it from a much more, I guess you could say, quote unquote white approach, because he's a punk. He's always been a punk first and foremost,
But even in the fact that we're having to impose white as a moral standard there is offensive, unwittingly offensive, if you know what I mean.
And Prince was certainly, like, he dabbled in some rap stuff in the early 90s, and some of the lyrics that he wrote at some stages weren't anywhere near as bad as this, and he was still very about empowerment, you know what I mean? And obviously discarded it completely towards the end of his life. Any kind of talk of sex or love or anything like that, really. But
did I ever tell you guys my Prince story?
You've got a Prince story?
I mean, I'm not involved, but I know somebody who's involved.
Okay.
I think it might be a bonus content feature, but I'll tell you after recording.
Okay.
And you guys can let me know if I can tell it.
maybe we'll do a split 7-inch, which is like one ridiculous story each.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it makes Prince. It makes Prince even more Prince than you ever thought Prince could be.
Okay. Do you guys have a nexus for this?
I do have a nexus, yeah. It doesn't involve Prince.
I have a very short one. I have a question I want to ask you after this as well, Chris. So we'll do the nexus first.
Let's do it, aye.
Okay. Let's get Fritz on the go.
It's the Unsung Podcast. Dave Grohl Nexus. Need to find a way to connect the show to that guy. From playing in Nirvana to hanging with Obama, he knows lots of folk, so stands to reason we'll find a link. It's the Unsung Podcast, Dave Grohl Nexus. Don't take too long.
You guys ready? Are you ready? Here we go!
Who's going to go first?
I'll go first because mine's really short.
We made this mistake last time, didn't we? Let Mark go last.
Yeah, I'll go first.
It's kind of like wah, wah, wah.
Exactly. Don't want to be that guy again, but I'm going to be that guy again. Okay, so this is dead short. Be Real is on. Is it When It Rain? Yeah, it's on When It Rain, right? Yeah. And Rage Against the Machine covered How I Could Just Kill a Man, and performed it live with both Be Real and the guy that's in Prophecy of Rage, the other singer from Cybersell, his name I can't remember. And Dave Grohl performed Like a Stone with Audioslave and Metallica at the Chris Cornell Memorial Concert in
Goodness
February.
gracious.
You used that exact
I
same.
He doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit.
It's either that or go down. I've already done it, Danny Brown, on my LP episode.
Standards are
And
right.
once again, he fucking flies in and steals a link from me as well. Even though he only had one fucking link, one of them's nicked from me.
Right, Dave.
So Danny Brown, a bunch of the production on Atrocity Exhibition was done by Evian Christ, who's an English electronic producer. He's actually got some really good stuff of his own. In 2015, Evian Christ was trapped in a metal cage by Leeds Festival security because he was going into the VIP section and they didn't believe that he was a VIP.
He was kettled.
He was kettled. And he tweeted from inside this 3-part fence, said, "Sorry guys, Reading Festival has been cancelled. Leeds have literally put me in a cage." And then a little video of him just sitting in a cage with security people around him.
Wow, that's crazy.
So that was at Reading and Leeds 2015. Also playing at Reading and Leeds 2015.
Also in the country that week.
The second stage was headlined by none other than Limp Bizkit, but main stage, the Libertines, Metallica, and Mumford & Sons. He did actually mention Mumford & Sons as well. He said, "Really though, I actually got put in a cage at a festival headlined by Mumford & Sons because the festival staff didn't believe I was a DJ and thought I was trying to break into the festival after my set."
I wonder what his pass was.
I know.
He must have lost it.
So Mumford & Sons are a huge band.
Yeah.
And it turns out that they are really huge because in 2011 they performed with the Avett Brothers and Bob Dylan at the 2011 Grammys. So, I mean, gee whiz.
Was that before or after their thrilling transition from denim to leather?
So that was an edgy performance there. Bob Dylan, I mean,
Heard of him.
he's a guy. But of course, on that album, Renegades, Rage Against the Machine covered Maggie's Farm by Bob Dylan because they did a whole bunch of
It's all covers. Yeah.
left-wing revolutionary sort of
They kick out the
fuck you
jams.
songs.
By the MC5.
By the way, I'm gonna. I think that's actually the best Rage Against the Machine album.
It's fucking great. There's some really good riffs. I love
Renegades of Funk is the best thing.
There's
they
a
ever
lot
did.
of great songs on it, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
like,
Pistol Grip Pump. Goes to Tom Jones, so good as well.
yeah.
Also on that record, they covered Beautiful World by Devo, which is a funny wee one. And if you
Is this another visual aid?
another video to end it, what I've actually got here is Nirvana covering Devo's 1980
Turnaround.
Obscurity Turnaround.
That's on Incesticide.
Yes, it
Track
is indeed.
5.
It was the B-side of Whip It.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and then Dave Grohl was in Nirvana.
Nice.
Okay, so Danny Brown, when he brought out the old album, it was the first album that got him kind of on TV shows. He did things like Jimmy Kimmel, but he also did Kathy Griffin's show, and he appeared in Kathy Griffin. Kathy Griffin, by the way, who's a comedian who was kicked off.
Is she the one that
for holding up
decapitated?
a decapitated head
yeah.
of Donald Trump as part of one of her sketches. Yeah,
Who's Kathy? I know the name, but I can't picture
a
the face.
red-headed.
She's
American
just,
comedian.
but she's also just got a really familiar name, like Danny Brown. Because I always thought I knew who Kathy Griffin was, but then I don't know who the fuck
She
is.
held up a prop of Trump's head and was booted off TV as a result after a Republican outcry. They were triggered by it. So on that show was A$AP Rocky, who I think Danny Brown's done stuff with, right?
Yeah, he's on Old, is he not? He's definitely
Could be.
yeah.
Maybe that's. But also Russell Brand, our very own. Russell Brand auditioned for the band 5.
Is that a true fact?
That is a true fact.
Holy shit, that
I
is
never
good.
thought you
Yeah,
were
that is
from
good.
Danny Brown to 5. That's incredible.
Thing is, that's not actually my link. I just wanted to throw that in because Russell Brand also auditioned for the role of Superhands in Peep Show.
I mean, yeah,
That is good, right?
Could have been
that,
good.
yeah.
Which I'm trying to be topical here, which brings us on to Olivia Colman, who plays Sophie.
Oscar winner Olivia Colman.
Olivia Colman, who just won an Oscar for Best Actress in The
Favourite.
Favourite, who was also in a film called The Lobster, which is
So
even
good.
better by the
So
same
good.
director.
Yeah.
And she also was part of this really, really good but kind of under-recognised comedy series called Look Around You, which copies school programming from when I was a kid, the really tacky chemistry sort of programs that they used to make us sit and watch on old TVs with
Imhotep.
That was by Peter
exactly.
Peter Serafinowicz.
Peter
Yeah.
Serafinowicz, yeah.
Thanks, Sans.
So
Dance.
bland. But yeah, and also on that show was Mr. Harry Enfield playing the ghost of Tchaikovsky.
That's right.
Tchaikovsky.
Was there not, because that was on the music program?
Yeah, that one
Was it
that was
not?
in Ghosts.
Oh,
That was in Ghosts.
because there was a music one where a
With
guy
Little Mouse.
invented hip hop,
Yes.
and it was really, really good.
There was
Yeah.
also a tune called Little Mouse, which is really good.
we might post the invention of hip hop with Danny Brown.
I'm rapping all day and I'm rapping all night. I'm rapping to the beat and I rap it up tight. I rap in the morning and I rap till I'm done. And everybody knows that I'm number one. Cause I'm rapping, I'm rapping, I'm rapping, I'm rapping, I'm rapping till you rap it. I'm rapping, I'm rapping, I'm rapping, I'm rapping. I'm rapping all day and I'm rapping all night. Come on, I'm rapping to the beat and I rap. Well done, that was fantastic, and thank you for introducing us all to the world of rap music.
Harry Enfield played the ghost of Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky wrote The Nutcracker, but also wrote Swan Lake. Swan Lake basically forms the
This is some
context
fucking Nexus, by the way.
of basically forms the context of the film Black Swan by Darren Aronofsky. From 2010, Natalie Portman plays the Black Swan. Or
Darren
she plays the
Aronofsky,
White Swan,
Darren
doesn't she?
Aronofsky,
As
we
opposed
love
to,
you.
anyway.
Sorry.
And so Darren Aronofsky, also the music in that film was by Mr. Clint Mansell. Darren Aronofsky and Clint Mansell worked together on The Fountain, also directed by Aronofsky and music by Mansell, in conjunction with a band called Mogwai. So that soundtrack is a combination of Clint Mansell and Mogwai, and it's really, really good soundtrack. It's actually a really good film. It's kind of a bit overlooked, but I really like it. It's very
It's pretty
fantastic.
out there.
Yeah, I think it's really quite beautiful. It's a bit OTT, but quite beautiful. Anyway, Mogwai released an EP, it's called EP, which had a really excellent Mogwai tune in it called Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick, as you probably know, was the director of a number of excellent films. The best of all was Eyes Wide Shut, clearly. But he also found time to do The Shining. The Shining starred Ms. Shelley Duvall as a long-haired screaming woman who actually looks a bit like the Momo meme.
She actually does. That's a good point. Yeah.
But crucially, Dave Grohl is apparently making a film of his life, and when he was asked in an interview who it is he's chosen to play himself, he said Shelley Duvall.
Is he actually making a movie of his life? Because that's peak Dave Grohl.
Apparently so.
You do know that Danny Brown mentions Stanley Kubrick in a lyric on this album.
I do. I'm like,
So you could have saved us like 40 minutes
Kubrick
there, but
with two bricks. I know
Yeah.
that. See, I did listen, but that was too easy.
yeah, no,
'Cause then
it was
you
too
wouldn't
easy.
know that
I enjoyed that.
then you
We
wouldn't
got
know that Russell Brand, yeah.
Yeah. There's a number of fantastic links in there.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
And we also mentioned The Lobster, Black Swan, and The Fountain, which
Yeah,
are
three
all
good
great
films.
movies.
Okay, let's bring in Fritz. Thanks for the Nexus.
Ready? Are you ready? Here we go!
Did Clint Mansell not do the soundtrack for Mother as well?
For Mother.
Yeah.
Oh, Mother?
Very, very
I haven't seen
possibly.
Mother yet, actually.
I had
It's a hard
I went
film
out for
to watch.
beers with Clint Mansell once, and it was not the person I expected him to be. He was just. I'd be listening to the music. I expected some like mad, eccentric, fucking long-haired, like sort of Christopher Lloyd type. Man, he's just a dude that
Just a
likes a
dad.
Guinness.
Just a dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and wore a leather jacket with patches on it.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So, shall we talk about this record?
We've kind of already done that.
Mark, you wanted to ask me something?
Yeah, so you mentioned that you've mentioned that you had trouble with the lyrics of the record. You also mentioned you thought the record was musically quite good. At what point were you pulled out of it?
Well, I listened to his back catalogue in general, and starting with this one, and I think I initially was like, okay, I'll kind of turn a blind eye to that. And then when I went back to XXX, I was just like, what the fuck? And then not so much with old, but then it was kind of compounded when I went back to the earlier stuff, and I saw that it wasn't there, and I was like, what the fuck? Why? Where was the need? You already proved that you were great without it.
Yeah.
Why did you have to go down this like cliched fucking braggadocio?
But that's what I think this record does, and I know that it's not perfect in any way, and it definitely has some problematic gender issues. But what I think it does do is it does look back. It's an album that reflects on his nearly, working with the mainstream, but he never went down that sort of gangster rap thing. But he did have fucking excess, and he has issues with addiction, and he has all these issues, and this record talks about them.
He has an edge. Like the fact that he was too rock for what do you call them? G
Unit. Yeah,
G Unit. That there is an element to Danny Brown that a lot of other rappers and hip hop artists don't have.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of you told us last week actually about how he's a big Korn fan, and I've seen photos of him with Korn t-shirts on.
Mm-hmm.
He played at the Gathering of the Juggalos.
That was my Linkin LP episode.
Yeah,
Dave Grohl.
That's crazy. Gathering of the Juggalos, and you can sort of see that one of the things about that is the Gathering of the Juggalos is, whether we said it about new metal in general as well, actually, whether we like it or not, one of the most authentically working class musical movements in America. It's white trash all the way, all the way down.
I'm proud of it, yeah.
It's incredibly working class as a result. And him being affiliated with that kind of reflects that sort of, in a strange way, reflects that sort of in touch nature. And so I can see how he's got an edge, but then, that in touch nature is not exactly reflected when he's singing in these songs about making a million, and
he's not fully woke yet.
See,
I'll give you that.
I think he's gone back to sleep. But he was pretty woke in his mixtapes, man.
I think when I was listening to this record and there's two songs on it where he drops down to like his regular voice, I wonder if the high pitched voice is actually a persona.
Yeah, like a character.
Like a character that he's playing, because his older stuff was the lower voice. Two songs on this, particularly the last one, From the Ground, which is about like how basically don't do what I did, but also I'm going to build it from the ground up, like going to jail, like his whole life, doing like selling drugs and all that.
Well,
I wonder if that's a part. I don't know if it is. But
Tell Me What I Don't Know, the one where he sings in the lower register second track, is a really good song.
Tell me what I don't know. Last night, homie got killed at the liquor store. Shot my nigga on the way to get a swisher. Breaking down the weed when the call got received. We were so ambitious. All we really wanted was New Jordan and some bitches. Flashing bank rolls in the club, taking pictures.
Kind of one that avoids. It doesn't avoid it actually. It does have a fair few bits, but I don't know. Maybe I actually like him singing on a low register. I think the high one works at some points. So like, Ain't It Funny, the one I keep mentioning, track 6, which is just a total banger of a song.
Absolutely, fucking
really
decent,
straight.
Ain't it funny how it happens? Ain't it funny how it happens? Ain't it funny how it happened? Upcoming heavy traffic, say you need to slow down, cause you feel self-crashed.
I first heard that actually, David, when I think you DJ'd it at one of your clubs. Or you did, like maybe even both of you, because it seems like the kind of thing you're obviously both going to slam on. But it stood out then, and it came back to me when we were listening to it. It's such a great song. It really is really good. It's like 3 minutes almost dead on. It's kind of got a minor thing going on as well, which is really, and I mean minor in key, not minor as in R. Kelly. But it's just a really, really well written, concise, catchy bit of music, and I'm like, fuck man, this guy can do it when he wants to do it. It does really kill. But
that's
song.
also a track that's really reflective as well. He's like, I'm fucking deep in this.
Yeah, and
substance abuse.
It's refreshing. And as a result, it's like there's something in it to be. You're like, fuck, this is working on all the levels. And I think his voice also really suits that song. I think the harsh voice is sometimes just too much, man. It's just sometimes really, really tough to take. but on certain tracks it sits well, given the style of music. Likewise, when he drops down, sometimes that sits really, really well. And I think it would be nice if he did that maybe a few more times. I don't know.
I think overall the production on this record though is really, really fucking interesting.
Yeah, I think this is.
He said the Warp gave him the chance to experiment, right?
Well, that's the fact. The fact that this album even came out on Warp is, really interesting. They don't do a lot of hip hop. They don't do that many US artists, to be honest.
Yeah,
and it's a real sort of sign of credibility, I suppose, musically anyway.
Yeah, he was saying about his decision to go with the deal. He was like, apart from the fact they were really enthusiastic, which is a good sign, he immediately felt less constrained by expectation.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, wow, so I can really experiment with
different Warp are never going to be expecting singles, are they?
Nah, well, they've got some though. Ain't it funny? It wasn't even a single. What's that all about?
That's the most obvious single
that
on the
is
record.
Crazy.
What's interesting is Pneumonia was a track, and Pneumonia, I think it's track 9.
30 bands in 30 minutes. Before I count it, I done damn near spent it. Put a brick on ya and some brick on it. Flow sick, nigga, call it pneumonia.
He said was a standalone track that didn't fit into the theme of the album, but it was his party track.
It's basically a trap song.
But it's a trap song, it's got that
Cut Hands
offbeat.
did it. The artist Cut Hands, who used to be called White House, and White House was this extreme electronic noise, power
but
noise stuff.
it is a kind of party track, but it's also abrasive as fuck. And when that out of time sort of clanging comes on,
that's a Cut Hands technique.
Yeah, totally.
Cut Hands is really interesting electronic artist who uses a lot of he's British, white Caucasian British, but he's very, very into African rhythms, and he involves a lot of that into his arrangements. He's got some really good stuff as well, and it works well in that song. I thought When It Rains actually a weirder choice for a single. I think
first single, yeah.
It's really got this dark and vibey thing going on, and it's buried way back in the album as well. Although that song has samples of Delia Derbyshire.
Yeah,
the
Doctor Who soundtrack.
The 60s sort of woman that worked for the BBC and was one of the pioneers of electronic music in the world, and is probably dramatically underrepresented in terms of the things that she was doing in electronic music at that time as a total pioneer. So it's interesting that he's kind of made a nod to her. That's kudos for that, at least, I guess.
And this record really hangs together because it's the first one that he's done, which is done overseen by him and another producer, just completely, apart with a couple of exceptions.
There's only a couple of tracks with a big roster, isn't
there?
I mean, Old was a great album, but it did feel bitty. There was big trap song, and then you had all your guests, and you had that song with the Purity Ring is really good track, but it was kind of felt like a bloated album, whereas this record has
There's a couple other strong influences come up, by the way, and they're both kind of 90s-ish. I thought that 7th track, Gold Dust, had a really strong Cypress Hill feel to it.
How lot of liquor while you doing cold blind? Residue on my mustache? How could it last? Roll $100 bill, nigga, blow cash.
Definitely,
a really good time. And I know House of Pain obviously ripped off Cypress Hill, but it has that real sort of effortless house party hip hop vibe of the 90s, and not quite as cool. Track 11, is it From the Ground?
Yeah.
The lower register one. The female vocal in that really pissed on my chips. It really did.
I didn't like it.
No, I mean, it's so 90s, and that kind of stereotypical background. I'm fishing for names here, but none are really coming to me. That really cheesy,
I don't know. I really like it.
It just was.
It's Kalela that does that line in that track. That does the chorus line. I've talked about maybe doing Kalela's first mixtape and bringing it in, because she's doing really, really interesting stuff. And yeah, I mean, I suppose that melody is quite sugar sweet, but I think that's kind of maybe the point.
I just there was something about the shape and the application of that vocal part that just really reminded me of like Tony Braxton type crap 90s sort of soulful R&B
pseudo
stuff.
soul.
Yeah. I thought that third track, Rolling Stone, had some really interesting percussion in it.
It's got a good hook, man. It's got a really
the proper
really good
funk
hook.
and soul
and
hook.
the bass in it was good.
My mind just feels so alone. Just release me.
Feel like I'm not alive, but I know I'm not dead.
So there's production and musical elements in this album that really appealed to me. Like I made a lot of notes about bits of instrumentation that I thought were really well used, and that's what I mean. It was like, fuck, I want to be able to talk about these, but I just think they're overshadowed, at least for me. Not for you guys, which is good. Genuinely is good, but I mean, today is it track 13? That's the one with the big synthy intro.
I say you never know when your time to go. I say you never know when your time to go. So damn right I do. I say you never know when your time to go. I say you never know when your time to go. So damn right.
Yeah, start again, like really cool. It was like another element, and it's almost like an electro song. That one. It's not an electro song, but it's got a kind of electro theme in it, and it's got like a really recognizable refrain that appears in it as well. It's got like almost like a chorus vibe, which a lot of the other stuff doesn't. And yeah, I mean, I like that about it as well. There's hell for it.
Inside to myself every day, the greatest lesson I'ma give them hell for. Until it's heaven on earth, my nigga, I'ma give them hell for. For whatever it's worth, my nigga.
Which had that much more old school feel to it, and it was much of a callback to like Browntown and stuff. The earlier work that he was doing, that kind of connected to me more.
That song, like, it's got lyrics in it about like basically like he's a warning, like don't go out and copy me.
Yeah,
That's basically what he's saying. Like, I'm going to go hell for it, but don't go out and copy me. Like,
says a guy that's using a lot of really early 90s hip hop influences. Like, all right.
yeah,
Like,
no,
I've done a lot
don't
of
go
bad
out
shit.
and copy
Don't go out and
me.
copy me
Don't
in
copy
my
me
life. Like,
as
yeah.
like
I'm
not a healthy man.
Cautionary tale.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
I thought you meant
exactly.
like a copyright infringement.
Yeah, this song is just a sung C in a circle.
Wow.
But yeah, no, but it's also sort of like he's not going to go down without a fight.
Yeah. But also just like, you know, he's done a lot of shit, but he's going to keep on fighting because that's the only thing he can do. And that's why I think this is quite a self-reflective record. Apart from Get High, which is just
That's all right.
it's proper.
See, man, I don't have a problem with that at all, man. Like, go for it, man. Fuck, like loads of old hip hop,
Yeah,
loads of
just get
classic
high.
hip hop was
Yeah.
about fucking getting high. Like,
Every morning I wake up, first thing I roll up before I get my day started. First I gotta wake up and get high. Check.
do it.
I think we didn't do this in order, so like I just want to talk about Downward Spiral, you know, first track, 9 Inch Nails reference.
Everybody say you got a lot to be proud of. Been high this whole time, don't realize what I done. Cause when I'm all alone, feel like no one care. Isolate myself and don't go now.
And it is this sort of 3-minute mad deconstructed jazz piece with him sort of talking over it.
You know, it's weird because we've done a lot of stuff, or you guys have brought to the table stuff like D'Angelo and stuff like POS, where they've taken these older and jazzier influences and samples and worked them into hip hop music really in a good and interesting fashion.
Yeah,
this is another example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think this track sets out is that this album is about to explain a man in a downward spiral, like what he has been doing and how he's survived it, and it sets the whole tone of the record, and it's like a deconstruction of the man and what he's done so far, and then by the end of it you get to all right, I fucked up, I'm not a perfect man, but I'm going to keep doing some interesting shit, basically.
Yeah, that first song's got a krautrock sample on it.
Guru,
Yeah, 60. Yeah,
who are German krautrock band.
Yeah,
not one of the big ones, but
really jazzy and weird. It's a whole unsettling vibe, that song, and it gives the record that unsettling feeling. I think, on the whole.
We also should talk about Really Dough as well, because that's a fucking total banger.
They say I got the city on fire. I ain't moving, that's a goddamn lie. Really though, like really though. Hey, really though, like really though.
Yeah, that hook. Kendrick's, I was going to say Kanye's. Kendrick's hook in that song is perfect.
Yeah,
man.
it's so good.
That was a single, right?
Yeah.
But that's lyrically one of the ones that I'm out.
Yeah, that's definitely like it's weird.
But that's like one of those ones where they've got Absol and Earl Sweatshirt, and that's like they're going back to this, like hip hop stereotype where it's three rappers all get a verse each,
yeah.
and they'll go hell for leather and
To be as puerile and disrespectful as they can.
But when you see when Kendrick has got the most subdued verse on a song, you
I
know
know,
there's a problem with the lyrics on it. You know what I mean? I don't mind Kendrick, but just not really for me.
Damn.
But yeah, so I mean,
you guys are going to put this one in, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting record, and I'm really glad that we got to talk about that, because I think it's worth talking about. I think that record should go in purely on the basis that we had that discussion, because we need to reckon with it at some point.
I mean, fucking hell, we tried to put in fucking Thorns. Like I can't argue for its exclusion after that, but on that basis, it just I think it lets itself down, so it's a no for me. I will probably go back and listen to some of his earlier stuff. I like the early mixtapes that were a lot more old school. But that's just,
I think I'm interested to see what he does next, because he's on Warp now, and this is obviously an experiment for him as well. I think this record is definitely the best one he's done, like without a shadow of a doubt. It's got more cohesion.
But I mean, I suppose we should just to say why we think it's unsung is because he's not nearly as big as a lot of the huge hip hop.
This was a commercial flop, commercial flop.
Yeah,
he spent 70,000 on samples for this album and then didn't recoup it. And he was asked in interviews, "What advice would you give other musicians?" He was like, "Don't spend 70,000 on samples." So I mean, commercially, this was a disaster.
Exactly. When you look at, like Post Malone doing the Hydro, selling out in 5 minutes. Kendrick Lamar's massive, and all of these. Hip hop is the main genre that sells right now. Danny Brown is a very small fish down there, even if he is earning enough to spend a lot of money on drugs.
He's far too out there for most mainstream taste. Like, he's really inaccessible for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I didn't find that listening to him personally, but I guess I've been listening to a lot of underground hip hop for a long time. So and obviously, Chris, you didn't have a huge issue, with it, like getting into it musically.
No, I mean, I think the tracks like "Ain't It Funny" in your arsenal, you should be much, much bigger. I think he should be doing stuff like that more often. And I think because he's not that huge, he doesn't have to abide by those tropes. He could kick out on his own. He could do something distinct and reject a lot of those kind of aspects that supposedly he's conscious of because of what he was saying he's trying to do on behalf of his daughter. It's like, well, fuck's sake, man, like, lead by example then.
Well, I think that he probably is trying to do that, but he's self-admittedly
he's a millionaire,
not a perfect man.
He's making $1 million a year.
Well,
he's making 30k in 30 seconds, and he spent it before he could count it. So for all of his principles,
saving money.
For all of his principles, he certainly doesn't want to rock the boat.
One of the last thing I was going to say about it is I wonder how much of his career trajectory is dictated by the fact he doesn't want to go that extra mile, because he keeps big company. He keeps really big company. Kendrick Lamar, A$AP Rocky, and he works with people like Run the Jewels and goes to Gathering the Jugglers and stuff. So I wonder how much of it is like, I don't really want to go that level.
Money talks.
So what are we talking about next week then, if you've voted this one?
We are rocketing our way back up to Scandinavia. We are going to do an album called World Music by the band Goat.
Excellent.
Okay.
Sort of psyche throwback 60s referencing stuff from this collective. There'll probably be some issues around cultural appropriation. Hurrah. Hopefully not as brazen as Tune Yards though. But it's a really fun album. It's a style of music we've not really covered, and I'd imagine at some point in the future we'll end up doing a psych rock mixtape, because there's a hell of a lot to talk about. We won't even attempt to do the genre justice, but this is a very, very good example and a great entry point for people that aren't particularly familiar. Plus it's like maybe the only band I can think of that's got two standalone sort of female vocalists just roaming about the stage being like it's a really compelling live show that they put on. So yeah, that album.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Oh, thanks guys. Go and vote on our Facebook page.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.